Good morning. With general questions. Question number 1, Joan McAlpine. Question number 2, Alison McInnes.
Sir, to ask the Government what actions underpin the proposals in the White Paper on Independence to simplify the tax system.
Cabinet Secretary Nicholas Sturr.
Scotland's future sets out this Government's aspiration to create a simpler tax system for Scotland which stimulates the economy, builds social cohesion and sustains Scotland's public services. As set out on page 121 of Scotland's future, the Government will work with Revenue Scotland to simplify the tax system to reduce compliance costs, streamline reliefs and help to reduce tax avoidance, with the aim of generating additional tax revenues of up to £250 million per year by the end of the first term of an independent Parliament. We have, of course, already shown a commitment to streamlining reliefs in developing devolved taxes. Land and buildings transaction tax will contain fewer reliefs than the UK tax that it will replace, and we will seek to replicate this approach in developing a tax system which reduces the scope for individuals and corporations to avoid paying their fair share of taxes.
Alison McInnes.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her response, but let me draw her back to the point. The Finance Secretary's expert group said that making it a simpler system would imply tough choices. So James Mirrlees, Nobel laureate and member of that expert group, wants VAT on food, even though it would cost a family £500 a year. If the Cabinet Secretary is not doing that, what tough choice is she recommending? Different industries have acquired special tax breaks, sometimes after long years of campaigning. Will the Secretary come clean and tell us which industries will lose out?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think it is a bit rich to get lectures on VAT increases from members of parties that are in government in Westminster. There are no Scottish Government proposals for what Alison McInnes suggests. I would recommend that she takes the time to read Scotland's Future, in particular Part 2 of that document entitled Scotland's Finances, which sets out very clearly the opening fiscal position of an independent Scotland and the changes this Government would make, both in terms of raising revenue and additional spending commitments over the first term of that independent Scottish Parliament. We've set out very clearly our plans and our vision for Scotland if we vote yes. What is absolutely missing from the other side of this debate is any vision for what happens to Scotland if we vote no.
Eileen MacLeod.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Cabinet Secretary highlight the benefits of having an integrated benefits and tax system will have on assisting families with childcare as outlined in Scotland's Future?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, one of the things I am very mindful of, and I know this will be a view shared across the Chamber, is that if we continue on the current path of welfare cuts under the Westminster system, then we are potentially consigning up to 100,000 more of our children to a life in poverty. I think that is simply unacceptable, and I don't think anybody in rich Scotland should be prepared to settle for that. So the White Paper sets out how we can start to do things differently, and Aileen MacLeod is absolutely right to draw attention to our transformational childcare policies. We wouldn't spend money on weapons of mass destruction. We would invest instead in the childcare that is required to give our kids the best start in life and help women into the workplace. And of course, the integration of tax and benefits is something that is badly needed in order to avoid people falling further into poverty traps, and it's only with the powers of independence that we get the chance to do that. That's why the White Paper is absolutely right to set out that vision of how we can do things differently and better in an independent Scotland. And right now it is the only vision for the future of Scotland in existence.
Question 3, Kenneth Gibson.
To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with opposition parties about currency options in an independent Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government agrees with the Fiscal Commission working group that retaining sterling in a formal currency union with the rest of the UK is in the best interest of both Scotland and the rest of the UK. Scotland is a key trading partner for the rest of the UK, which of course exports more to Scotland than to Brazil, South Africa, Russia, India, China and Japan put together.
Kenneth Gibson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her answer. Does she agree that it simply isn't good enough for opposition parties to denounce the Scottish Government plans regarding retention of the pound? And if opposition parties think retaining sterling would not be in Scotland's interest, is it not time for them to say what future currency they believe Scotland should have if Scots vote, as I believe they will, for independence in September?
Cabinet Secretary.
Kenneth Gibson is absolutely correct. I confidently predict that all of those politicians in the Labour-Tory-Liberal alliance right now that are arguing against independence, as is their absolute right to do so, will, if Scotland votes for independence, be on the same side as we are, arguing for sterling in a currency union. That is the reality of the situation. And I'm sure members across the chamber will have seen the intervention today from a number of Scotland's leading business people saying that retaining sterling in a currency union, if we vote for independence, is exactly the right thing to do, not just for Scotland but for the rest of the UK. But I think, on a more general point, and it follows my response to Alison McInnes, we are seeing, I think, significant difficulties for the No campaign, who are devoid of any positive vision for the future of Scotland if we don't become independent. And it's not going to be good enough to continue to say you can't do that, to continue to spread fears and smears that are falling apart before our very eyes. Scotland's future is the only vision for the future of Scotland, and that's why I think we'll see more and more people support it.
Malcolm Chisholm.
Once again, the Cabinet Secretary is entirely missing the point, or rather the point. So will she accept two things which she rejected last week? Firstly, it is totally irrelevant if there is an independence vote what I or any of the opposition parties or anybody in this chamber thinks about a single currency. The decision will be for the rest of the UK, over which we will have no influence whatsoever. And secondly, will she also accept that even if there were a common currency, we would not have any fiscal independence, something which she kept saying last week? Will she accept those two facts which she completely failed to understand last week?
As I've said many times in this chamber before, I've got enormous respect for Malcolm Chisholm, but he's putting that position under serious pressure at the moment. Can I just say three things? Firstly, it is completely wrong to say that what people on the opposition benches think about life in an independent Scotland is irrelevant, because if the people of Scotland democratically vote to be independent, you're going to have to come forward with some policies about what life should be like in an independent Scotland, unless you want to remain consigned to opposition forever, which I have to say you do a good job of suggesting at the moment. And secondly, this issue about the rest of the UK, what nobody on the no side can answer is how it would possibly make any sense for the rest of the UK to force its own businesses into a separate currency with Scotland when Scotland didn't want to be in a separate currency. It would cost businesses in the rest of the UK at least £500 million in transaction costs alone. And the key strength of this position, which the no side really struggle with day and daily, is that this is not just in the interests of Scotland, it is overwhelmingly in the interests of the rest of the UK as well. And thirdly, of course Scotland would have fiscal independence, but more than that, we'd have the ability to have control of our welfare state, something that I thought Malcolm Chisholm, looking at the destruction and devastation being done to our welfare state by the Tories that he seems to support in the Better Together alliance, are doing. The sooner we get control of our welfare state here in Scotland, the better.
Question 4, Margaret McDougall.
To ask the Scottish Government what it is doing to tackle fuel poverty.
Minister, Margaret Burgess.
The Scottish Government is committed to eradicating fuel poverty and has invested £220 million on fuel poverty and energy efficiency programmes since 2009, with an estimated total net saving to household incomes over the lifetime of the measures of more than £1 billion. We have created a £200 million per year initiative using government funding to lever in additional investment from energy companies to tackle fuel poverty. But we need the full powers of independence to tackle all the causes of fuel poverty. If elected in an independent Scotland, this government will move the costs associated with the energy company obligation and warm home discount from levies and consumers' bills to central resources. This would cut energy bills by roughly 5% or £70 a year, and would allow a new means of funding and delivering energy efficiency improvements to Scottish homes that is fairer and better suited to our needs.
Margaret McDougall.
I thank the Minister for that answer. Sharp rises in gas and electricity prices have seen more families plunged into fuel poverty across Scotland, and we are fast approaching 1 million households in fuel poverty. The White Paper proposes reducing energy bills by around 5%, as the Minister has just said, by moving the cost of some environmental schemes from energy bills and funding them from central government resources. Is it not the case that this 5%, a saving of approximately 20 pence a day on average, would be added to taxation? And with sharp rises in energy prices, how does this government aim to meet the statutory 2016 target to eradicate fuel poverty?
Minister.
Thank you. I outlined in my answer how we are tackling fuel poverty and continue to do so. And we will continue to keep the same spending in independent Scotland to deal with fuel poverty, reducing fuel bills, but also having full powers over our economy and tax and welfare systems, reducing poverty overall in Scotland, and including fuel poverty.
Question 5, Neil Bibby.
To ask the Scottish Government for what reason it considers that in the event of Scotland becoming independent, charging UK students tuition fees but not students from other EU countries will be compatible with EU law.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Russell.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government believes that the unique and unprecedented position in higher education of a post-independent Scotland will enable us to continue our current policy in a way which is consistent with the principles of free movement across the EU as a whole and which is compatible with EU requirements. As detailed on page 200 of Scotland's Future, your guide to an independent Scotland, our policy is based on the unique and exceptional position of Scotland relative to other parts of the UK, on the relative size of the rest of the UK, on the fee differential, on our shared land border and common language, on qualification structure, on the quality of our university sector and on the high demand for places.
Neil Bibby.
I've read the White Paper section. I've also read Article 18 of the EU Functions Treaty, which clearly states that discrimination on the grounds of nationality is illegal. And even the University of Scotland legal advice that the Minister likes to refer to states clearly our UK students will require to be treated no differently from other EU students. So is the Minister actually denying that under EU law it is illegal to discriminate on the grounds of nationality? And if he isn't, where does that leave his policy in the White Paper?
Cabinet Secretary.
It leaves the policy completely untouched because the argument of objective justification, as the member will know given his expertise in European law, the argument of objective justification is a clear and understood argument in these circumstances. I think the member should consider that argument, and perhaps he would also like to reflect upon the policy of his own party, which appears to be to impose tuition fees. So the offering of the No campaign is to have tuition fees in Scotland. The Scottish Government believes that education should be based on the ability to learn, not the ability to pay. If the member shared that, then he would work hard to make sure that that continued in Scotland. But of course, that pass has been sold by the member and the Labour Party.
Liam MacArthur.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Can I ask the Minister whether he can confirm whether or not the law officers have given an opinion on the policy that's contained within the White Paper?
Cabinet Secretary.
The member is aware that such confirmation is not given by any government, is not given by his government, Westminster, is not given by this government. But I will be happy to say to the member that the detail that I've given in the answer, for example, the unique and exceptional position of Scotland relative to other parts of the UK, on the relative size of the rest of the UK, on the fee differential, on our shared land border and common language, on qualification structure, on the quality of our university sector, on high demand for places, are all clear elements of an argument for objective justification. And I'm sure he will understand that term.
Liz Smith.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. In an answer to our late colleague David McCletchie on the 9th of February 2012, the Cabinet Secretary said that he wanted to introduce a management fee for students from other EU countries to defray at least some of the cost of providing them with free higher education. There is no mention of this policy on pages 449 to 451 of the White Paper. So has this policy been abandoned?
Cabinet Secretary.
Considerable discussion took place with other European countries and within the European Union, with European Union officials, about the concept of management fees, and it's a very difficult thing to do. It would still be something that would be considered, but it is extraordinarily hard to do, and I think what we're offering here is a very positive approach to the issue of EU students. I'm always happy if the member has ideas about how we could improve our higher education system to look at them, but as the member's ideas have also included charging students in Scotland fees, then I suspect we won't be able to come to an agreement on them.
Question 6, Willie Coffey.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it has estimated an independent Scotland's share of the UK national debt.
Cabinet Secretary Nicola Sturgeon.
Well, the first thing I would say is that the size of the UK national debt is an argument for independence, not an argument against it. An independent Scotland's share of the UK national debt and, of course, our share of UK national assets would be part of a negotiated settlement between Scotland and the rest of the UK. Scotland's future sets out the possible scenarios for Scotland's share of UK national debt, and these showed that if Scotland was assigned either a historic or a per capita share of UK debt in 2016-17, we would have a lower debt to GDP ratio than the UK as a whole.
Coffey.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. She'll be aware that when Labour left office in 2010 in the UK, the debt was £750 billion, and it's now predicted to be £1.6 trillion by 2016. Can she assure me that in negotiations that follow a yes vote next year, that she will drive a hard bargain with the UK to recognise Scotland's greater contribution to the UK's finances, more so than our population levels would suggest?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, I agree with that. I think Willie Coffey makes a good point. It should be remembered that in the last 3 years, the UK Government has borrowed almost £400 billion. As a result of economic mismanagement at Westminster, not only will cuts to public services continue for years to come, but the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility forecasts that the UK is set to remain in deficit for the next 50 years. Scotland's public finances are stronger than those of the UK, and it's only with independence that Scotland can chart a better course for the future.
Ian Gray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Whatever level of inherited debt is agreed or negotiated, the White Paper proposes that the Government of an independent Scotland would not take on that debt, but rather pay Treasury to service it. Is this not an admission that the Scottish Government knows that a separate Scotland will face far higher interest rates on government borrowing than the UK currently does?
Cabinet Secretary.
No, it's not. And as Ian Gray would know, I assume he's read the Fiscal Commission work on this. He will know that they have looked in detail at this issue, and they have concluded that an arrangement whereby Scotland gradually assumes an agreed share of UK debt while contributing an agreed share to UK debt interest payments would both be an efficient and a sensible solution. There's going to come a point in this debate, and I actually think this point is now, that as well as just chucking criticisms at the vision we are setting out for Scotland's future, that the No campaign actually managed to come up with some ideas and vision of their own.
Question number 7, Colin Beattie.
To ask the Scottish Government what plans it has to revitalise Prestwick Airport.
Cabinet Secretary Nicola Sturgeon.
As members will be aware, we completed the acquisition of Prestwick Airport on the 22nd of November, securing its future and safeguarding the significant number of jobs supported by the business. We are now developing our detailed proposals to ensure that Prestwick delivers a commercial rate of return and can thus maintain and enhance its contribution to the local, regional and national economy. Our business plan will consider all potential commercial opportunities and will maximise the use of the assets at the airport. It will consider new and existing revenue streams and how they can deliver optimum returns.
Colin Beattie.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her response. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that bringing the airport into state ownership could potentially improve the Scottish economy through increased business and tourism?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I certainly agree with Colin Beattie that acquiring the airport was hugely preferable to standing by and watching the airport close, with all of the impact that would have had on jobs and on the local, regional and national economy. So the decision we've taken recognises the role that Prestwick can play in enhancing not just the Ayrshire economy but the wider Scottish economy. We firmly believe that Prestwick has a positive role to play alongside Glasgow, Edinburgh and Scotland's other airports, and we look forward to developing the plans to ensure that that is indeed the case.
John Scott.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the Cabinet Secretary's positive comments, and the Cabinet Secretary will be aware of the new generation of aircraft, the Airbus A380 and the Boeing 777 Dreamliner, and the different ranges these aircraft have relative to the current transatlantic workhorse, the Boeing 747. Has she and Transport Scotland considered developing or having Prestwick Airport developed as a long-haul hub from the Far and Middle East en route to America, specifically for these new aircraft given that Prestwick has the only runway long enough to accommodate these new aircraft in Scotland? And would she be prepared to meet with me to further discuss this concept?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'd certainly be prepared to meet with John Scott, one of the local members, to discuss any positive suggestions for the future of the airport. He'll understand I'm not going to give a categoric answer on that particular suggestion, except to refer him back to my original answer, which made very clear that we will consider all possible commercial opportunities. And I'll be happy to meet and discuss with anyone. I'm about to meet Brian Donohoe, one of the local MPs, to discuss his ideas for the future of the airport, and I'm happy to meet with anybody else to discuss ideas and suggestions that they have.
Thank you. That ends general questions.